Hi, this is Lou, welcome to my channel, and today's project is going to be this wintry tree scene with fields and trees in watercolour. It's a little bit stylised, a little bit minimal. I hope you're going to enjoy it. So let's get started. So this is what I'm going to be using today. First of all, let me show you the colours. So you could just do this in one colour, but I've picked like a selection of different cool blues really. Blues, kind of, this one's more purple, more of a grey, and this one's more of a green. So these colours are, this one's Moonglow, this one's called Hematite Genuine, or Genuine, I'm not sure, Lunar Blue, and Perylene Green. And these are all Daniel Smith colours, and you may be able to see on some of the swatches that there's some granulation in there, and I want to play with that effect today. But if you don't have granulating colours, you don't have special effects colours, do not worry. Just use some nice greens and blues, some nice cool colours, and you'll get a lovely effect with this picture. I've just added in a little extra warm colour. This one is raw umber, and it's just to mix in with these colours, just to add maybe a little bit of warmth and to shift them slightly towards the green. So I probably won't be using this on its own, but I will be using it to kind of mix in and give a few areas that look maybe a little bit greener or a little bit browner. The paper I'm working on today is Arches cotton cold pressed watercolour paper, and this is the 7x10 block. It's a block because it's gummed all the way around the edges, so it should stay nice and flat when I add lots of water to it. I've got some masking tape because I'm going to create a nice clean border around my painting. You don't need this if you're working on a block, but I like that nice white border, so that I'm going to use that. I've got a pencil and a razor just for doing the basic sketch. So I've got a few different brushes that I'm going to be using today. This one is a flat brush, it's a 3/4 inch, but any kind of big brush to put down lots of water is all you need. And then I've got this pointed round brush. This one happens to be a size 8. And this brush is actually got really long bristles. It's a size 3, so it's quite skinny, but it's quite long, so it holds a lot of paint in the bristles, so you can make longer, skinnier strokes with it. So these brushes are really good for making long, wispy lines, which is why I'm using it on this painting. But use what you have. Any small skinny paintbrush will paint you nice fine lines, but having the rigger just makes it a little bit easier. That's why I'm using it for this. So I'm working on a block, so I don't really need to tape my paper, but I do like seeing that nice white margin, so I'm going to do it anyway. But if you're working on an individual sheet of watercolour paper, you may want to tape it down to a nice smooth hard surface. And if you tape your masking tape to the table first before you tape it to the paper, it will reduce the chances of the paper tearing. So the first thing I want to do is to create a nice washy sky. So I'm going to start using just water and my flat brush and just applying water to the paper. And you can bring the water all the way down, but you probably don't need to bring it down all of the way down the paper because we're going to be painting in front of this. So I'm going to put some dark colour in at the top, and then I'm going to let it blend out as we get further and further down. So I'm going to paint this maybe halfway down the paper, something like that. And now I'm just going to start putting little swishes of colour in. So I'm going to start with this Lunar Blue at the top. See if I can get that a bit darker. I'll bring that down a little bit. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the Perylene Green and just add a little green tinge into the sky. And then the same on this side with the Moonglow. Just going to add a little bit of that warmer purpley colour into the sky there. And again, I'll bring that down. And I'm just wafting it backwards and forwards. And I want to have a few areas that are kind of still a little bit light in there. So make it darker at the top. Oh, right. Maybe a bit too dark there. Never mind. It will lighten up. It will lighten up as it dries. Oh. Splashing water around. Definitely want more of the Lunar blue in here. And I'm just going to take it down to maybe about there. And that's it. That's all I'm going to do. And now I'm going to leave this to dry completely. And you can use like a hairdryer or something on it if you want to speed up that drying time, because it is still quite wet on that surface. So now my sky is all dry, I'm going to start sketching in my landscape. And I'm going to do this fairly roughly, fairly loosely. If you don't want to do the sketching part, then I've provided some line art for this, which is available to download on my website, and you'll find the link for that in the description box below. The feature of this is going to be some kind of bare branched trees, and I'm going to roughly put in where I want my tree. So I know I want like a feature tree. I'm just going to work out about where I want that, and I think maybe about here. Something like that. Now I've put that in so lightly you won't be able to see it, so I'm going to go over it again, just a little heavier, and this time I'm going to introduce a few kind of bumps and curves into it. So it's not completely flat, it kind of goes bump, 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 bump all the way around. And then I'm going to have it kind of sloping down a little bit on this side. So I'm having the bottom of my tree slightly lower on this right hand side because I want it to be on a hill, a slight hill, and that hill is going to slope down this way. So let's just put in the line for that hill. I'll go down like that. And then in the middle of the tree, I'll have a trunk, something like that. And then I think it may look a little lonely on its own, so I want to put in a little friend for it, maybe here. Again, sketch it in really lightly. And actually, I think I might have these two trees overlapping a little bit. So I might have this little one just sitting in front of it. And again, a little trunk. So let's make that line a little darker so you can see it. And then I'm going to go in very carefully, rub out any of those lines that I don't want. And then the ones that are still left there, I'm just going to tap over with my eraser and just make them nice and light. So I still want to be able to see where the edges are, but I don't want it to be obvious underneath the watercolour. So this is my focal point. And then I want some other interest in here as well. So I think I might put another line of trees kind of coming out behind it. So maybe up here. So maybe like that. Can you see that line? Something like that. And then the other end of it would be there. And then this can have a little line of trees on it as well. But because it's in the distance, they'll be smaller. So I can just create my little bumpy shapes. You'll notice that they're kind of not quite hitting the ground. Quite often when you see trees and they've been in fields, they end like absolutely perfectly level above where the field is, and I think that's because the animals have been grazing them. So let's have a bigger one on the end. Something like that, and then each of those will have a trunk as well, and I'll make sure some of them overlap a little bit. And also, if I've made the same kind of shapes too often, I'll maybe go in and fix them a little bit. And I might just have one like just going over the edge there behind. So I've got a little line of trees up here, and I've got a bigger line of trees here. I'm wondering whether I need just another little one there that's going to sit behind this tree. And yeah, I think that's better. A little gap, and then another row of trees there. Okay, and I'm going to put another line here in the foreground. That's going to be like a field with like ploughed rows in it. And then maybe that's got some little bushes on the top, maybe not whole trees, something like that. Maybe there's another kind of, maybe it's a little hedgerow or something, with some little gaps in it. So I've got a little line along the bottom here, and again I'm going to remove any of the lines from inside that I don't want, and I'm going to lighten up the lines around the outside. Although I think I'm going to paint these fairly dark, so these ones don't matter as much. So there's my sketch, and now what I want to do is to go through and fill in my trees and bushes. And I'm going to do this in a particular way. So I'm going to use a random selection of colours from my choices, make them look a little varied. And I think I'll start with this one here, because it's going to be in front of the one that's next to it, the one that I've kind of called my feature tree. And I'm using a pointed brush, and I'm just going to outline it. So I'm using my Lunar blue here, and I'm just creating an outline around it. And at this point, if you want to make any changes to the shape of it, you can do that. Just refine it a little bit, make it look a little more lumpy. And then I'm going to wash my brush out, clean it off, and use the clean brush to blend into the centre. And I can use the clean water to push from the centre to the outside of those shapes. If I want to darken the edges, I can come in with some more pigment there, just spot it in places on the edges and allow it to blend a little bit more into the centre. So having done this one, I now want this one to dry before I start on the one next to it. So I'm going to start doing ones back here and then these ones down here. The ones in the distance I want to be a little bit paler, and then the ones closer to me I want to be a little bit darker. So I can start with this one here. And just blend that out again. If I think it's too dark, I can clean my brush and use that clean brush just to pick up any of the paint from the surface. If I think it's too light, I can go in and add more pigment around the outside. And while it's still wet, you can refine any of the edges and change the shape of it as you like. Add a little bit more of the purpley Moonglow into the bottom, I think. And again, I don't want to do the one next to it. I could do this one here. Let's do that in that nice green. So yeah, a line around the outside, and I'm taking the colour off, cleaning my brush and allowing that to pick up bits of colour. The reason I'm making the trees darker around the outside and then lighter in the middle is that when you see bare trees in winter, quite often what you see is the branches, and they come in quite thick from the trunk, and then they all spread out throughout the tree, and then as they get towards the end they branch further and further and further, so you can see the outline of the tree more defined than the inside where you'll just see the bigger branches, and we're going to put those in later. So now I can do these ones at the front, and I want these ones to be a little darker. I'm starting the same way, but I can add a little bit more pigment into these. And again, I'm just changing those colours. Now these ones are maybe more like hedges or something, so they're actually sitting on the landscape rather than raised up from it. Can you hear my dog howling downstairs? No idea what the problem is. Probably somebody in the building's had a delivery. So with these ones, I'm actually dropping in more colour, especially around the edges, and I'm especially using a little of that raw umber in there just to give them a little bit more warmth, because things that are closer to you, you'll see a little warmer, and things in the distance you tend to see as cooler colours. And I'm just dotting around these colours. I've got a bubble in there, let's try and get rid of that. And I definitely want some darker areas on these. This edge here and this edge here are now dry, so I can do my big tree. I think I'm going to do this one. Oh, I dipped my hand in the paint. That's one of the hazards of painting different areas of the page, is that you could end up smudging it. And then get in and just try and get up to the tree next to it without painting over it. And then I'm just adding water in. I think I'm going to add a little bit of the raw umber in as well. Let's get the whole thing nice and wet. More water in the centre than at the outsides. And then I can see if any areas need a little more pigment, and I think I'll have it a bit more green in a couple of areas, just drop in some of that Perylene green. A little bit more blue in others. I'm going to continue working on these trees and filling them all in exactly the same way. So now I'm going to put in my fields, and what I want to do is to create a graduated effect so that they're darker at the top and then they get lighter as they go down. So I'm just going to take a line of colour, any colour. I'm using the blue for this one, the Lunar blue, and I'm just creating a nice line along the top of the field. And I can add a bit more pigment in there, because what I want to do now is to bring that down. So I'm dipping my brush in water without really cleaning any of the paint off it, just dipping it in and collecting some more water. And I just run a line of that next to the paint that I put in. And I can do the same, add more water and bring that line down further. And I'm going to carry on painting water all the way down to the tops of these little bushes down here. If you want to, you can add a little bit more pigment along the top. You can do some blending just by brushing your brush backwards and forwards. You can add in little streaks of other colours. Maybe a bit much there. Before this dries, I want to do the next bit, which is to put in the trunks of these trees here. So I'm going to turn my paper around for that. And I'm going to mix up some quite dark pigment. I'm mixing the green and the blue together. The Perylene green is a nice intense colour, so I can get quite a dark colour for that. And I'm actually going to switch to my rigger. And then as I put it down, I just place it into the top of the wet edge, and you start to see that pigment running. And then I can draw it up through the tree, getting lighter and lighter until I get to the top. Now I want quite a thick trunk on this tree, so I can thicken that up a bit there. And then I can allow the branches to split off this time as I draw the paintbrush up through the tree. And now I can draw more branches in that split off from that main trunk of the tree. Can thicken some of them up at the join. Because these are kind of quite major branches. I'm going to come back and fill the rest of the branches in for now, but I want to get this trunk in while this area is still wet. So I'm going to do the same there. And for this one, I'm going to use more of that Moonglow, that purpley colour. So I can create that little area of shadow there. And just put in those major branches up to the end of the tree. And yes, I will come back later and fill the rest in. So I've already done 2 layers like this. I started doing this one and then realised that the camera wasn't turned on, so I wasn't filming. So I've done this bit in exactly the same way as I've done here. Now I'm going to do exactly the same on this bit. So my nice line of colour along the top. I'm adding in some water. More water. And then for this one, I'm just switching to my larger brush so I can bring that water all the way down to the bottom of the page. And then I want to do quite a similar thing as I did on the sky. Just bring in some more areas of pigment, do some swooshing, bring in some of those different colours. And allow them to blend out towards the bottom. There's a few bits in here where I've just gone a bit overboard with the colour. I just want to take some of that out. So I'm just using my paper towel. But then that's leaving me with some hard edges. So I can just go back in with some clean water and smooth those out again. Now while this is still wet, I want to do exactly the same thing, but with these little bushes. My little branches are going to be more frequent and they're going to come out in more places and just up to the end through the brushes. I can alter my colours a little bit. I do still want that nice bleed there where the 2 wet areas meet. Let's do these ones. Whoops, and I've bled into that area, that's okay. Just let it go. I think this is quite dry down here, so I'm not getting those bleeds just on that corner. But I don't want to jeopardise the way it's drying, so I'm just going to leave it. If I start messing around with it, I'd end up with some blooms which I may not want. So the last thing is just to go back to these trees and fill in the branches. So I'll show you how to do it on the big tree, and I find it useful to turn the paper so that my arm is always pulling away from the tree trunk. But you do it whatever way feels comfortable for you. So I'm just taking more of this colour and I'm drawing branches out from the from the few branches that I put in somewhere to the edge, and it doesn't really matter where. And I'm curving them slightly. Sometimes I can curve them so that they're kind of like, they're just kind of falling away from the other branch. And then sometimes you can curve them so there's more obvious kind of connecting bit. And you can cross them over as well, because that would happen all the time with real branches. But each one, because this is a nice stylized tree, is drawn right up to the edge. Now, you can go wild with this. You can add in as many or as few branches as you like. Each of the branches will divide and taper off at different points, but I am putting more divides and more branches of the branches at the edges, so there's more of an open space in the middle of the tree. I do want some going down to the bottom like that. Maybe one coming from here. And I'm just going to keep working my way around and around and around and adding more and more little branching bits. So when I'm nearly finished, I can just turn it right way around and see if I like the way it looks and see if there's anything else that I think it might need. And I think this one's okay. I'm going to move on. I'm going to do all of the rest. I'm going to speed it up and then I'll come back to you at the end. So at this point I start to get a little bit nervous about adding more details because I'm quite liking where it is and I don't want to ruin it, but I think it might need something a little bit more. I'm tempted to put in some stripes down the hill to make it look like a ploughed field, but I quite like the ridges that make it look like there's kind of fallen snow in there, so I'm going to leave that, I think. What I am going to do is I'm just going to use my white pen and add in a few white branches into these trees here. See if I can get the pen to work. And you could do this with some bleed proof white or some white gouache as well. So there we go, just a few white lines just to define that a little bit more. So there is my completed wintry landscape with bare trees and that snow, and I really hope that you've enjoyed this one. If you give it a go, then do let me know. You can post your work to Instagram and tag me at Lou Rachel Davis. I do love seeing what you made and I love it when you share things with me, so thank you for doing that. Like I said, the line art for this will be available on my website, and if you want to download that, then there'll be a link for that in the description box below. I really hope you've been enjoying this season of woodland inspired tutorials. I've got one more for you that's next week, and then I'll be having a break for a few weeks. If you want to know what's coming up, the best thing to do is to sign up for my mailing list, and I'll be sharing first what the next season's theme is going to be and what the dates are going to be. So if you want to know that, I will be sharing it on social media closer to the time, but that news goes out to my mailing list subscribers first. So I look forward to seeing you again in another video, hopefully next week. And yeah, I really hope that you've enjoyed this one. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.